going to go ahead and get started. I am Brooke Wedgworth, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and today is going to be a spotlight on literacy. So really just highlighting what we do throughout the system with literacy. I will say that this is something that I'm very passionate about, really have been since I started teaching, and then I had the privilege of working for ARI part-time as I taught as well, and in the summers, and went across the state presenting various workshops on literacy. So it's something that I've been passionate about for 20 plus years. So I'm excited about the things that we're doing in our district, and excited to share those with you today. And before we get going, we do have our local reading specialist with us today. So each of our schools, they each have a local reading specialist or reading coach, and we're very fortunate. That's something we've had for several years in our school system. We funded it even when our state wasn't funding that position because we knew how important it was. And so that team, we work really well together to really make all of this happen. So thank you for being here. So the first thing we're going to start with is just a quick overview of the Alabama Literacy Act. This is something, so we did a whole parent session last year, and this was the big focus for that. So that is recorded. I'll show you where that is if you want to go back and watch and learn a little bit more about that. Whit and I, we actually host a podcast too, and we release 2 podcasts a month about different things going on in our district. But we actually did a podcast on this probably at least maybe a year and a half ago. So we have a whole podcast just on the Alabama Literacy Act as well. And so you can go back and listen and watch both of those. So just a little bit about the Literacy Act. It was passed in 2019, and the big piece of this is really just systematic efforts across the state to improve literacy and to make sure that all of our students are proficient readers. And really the goal is that they're on grade level and proficient by 3rd grade. And so there are lots of pieces in this act, but that, I guess, ultimately is the goal. So just to highlight a few things in the Literacy Act that really, I guess, are mandated or prescribed through the Act. One is literacy assessment. So we have certain literacy assessments that we are asked to use and use 3 times a year. Intervention programs. So they release a list each year of intervention programs that you can use for intervention, and so fortunately, the intervention programs that we were already using and already had in place were those that were chosen by the task force as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about our intervention programs, and we have one of our interventionists with us today, so she'll share a little bit with you about that. They also mandated your core program and using specific core programs. Another piece is that districts would have local reading specialists. So as I said, we've had those for years. Now there are lots of qualifications, and they even come with a job description for those local reading specialists. We do receive funding from the state for local reading specialists. That doesn't necessarily cover all of our reading specialists, but covers a good portion of that. So we're fortunate that that now has been something that they've done. So our local reading specialists, their main job is to really work with teachers. So they spend about 60% of their time coaching teachers. And I think that's a great thing because ultimately their coaching will then impact students. And so, like I said, we have a local reading specialist at all of our elementary schools. The third part of this act is the Student Reading Improvement Plan. Sometimes people will call that, I'm going to turn this off. Sorry. Sometimes people will call that SRIPs, or you may hear people call it like CRIPs. And so one of the terminologies that we like to use. But basically, that's a reading improvement plan that we put in place for kids kindergarten through 3rd grade who have a consistent reading deficiency. So that means it's been shown with several pieces of data that they have a reading deficiency. We put a plan together, and there's several pieces to that plan. And so one piece in that plan is that the kids would receive intervention, which again is something that we were already doing prior to this, but now it's part of this plan. And then we have other pieces that can go with that. So if kids are on a plan and they are not making progress, then our next layer is we can offer them before after school tutoring. And so that's another piece of the Literacy Act. So you might wonder why there's that large number to the right of that, and that is because that is what we spend on before after school tutoring, about what we spend each year on before after school tutoring, and that is something that is funded locally. So we don't receive money for these things, but we're still asked to provide them. And we do feel like it's beneficial for our students. So we have our highly qualified teachers providing tutoring for some of these students before and after school. Another layer and piece to that is the summer reading camp. So once again, these kids who are on a plan may receive tutoring, and then they are all invited to attend summer reading camp. That's 60 hours of really intensive reading intervention. We have some fun too while we're there. But really, again, trying to close those gaps, help them to continue to make progress. And we have teachers from our system who teach really the whole month of June in summer reading camp. So that's pretty amazing as well. We also have paras, and then the kids are actually able to participate in some, I guess, specials. So we incorporate the arts in with our literacy as well. So as you can see, there's another number besides summer reading camp, because that's something else that's mandated through the Literacy Act, but we also fund that locally. We've been fortunate to have ESSER funds for the past 2 years. That's something that goes away this year, so we won't have that any longer. So we're looking, and again, the number varies based on how many students, but we're looking at around $195,000 just for summer reading camp. So that's to pay our teachers and the materials and supplies that we need for camp. Another piece of the Alabama Literacy Act is communication. So something we've tried to do, again, for years through our SST is to really, which is our student support team, is when kids are receiving intervention to communicate with parents about where they are and the progress they're making, that is clearly outlined in the Alabama Literacy Act, that we do that on a regular basis. And the last piece of that is professional learning, and that's just that our that our teachers continue to receive professional learning that will enhance their literacy classroom and really in the science of reading. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. So professional learning, these are some things that we've been working on over the years. And a lot of this actually, or probably most of this, came even before the Alabama Literacy Act, because again, we've always been looking for ways. We have wonderful teachers, but what are ways that we can even help them to grow and improve and provide even better instruction for our students? So one thing that I'm probably most excited about is Phonics First. And I'll tell you a little bit about more Phonics First in a minute too, but this is something that we've really been working on for several years, and so we knew that our teachers really needed this approach, this multisensory approach to teaching phonics. We wanted it to be systematic and sequential so that each year kids could build on that. And so we started with our kindergarten teachers several years ago and actually trained all of our kindergarten teachers. And then the next year we trained all of our first grade teachers. And then the next year we trained all of our second grade teachers. And then the next year we trained all of our third grade teachers. And so that way, Phonics First is happening in Tier 1 for all of our students. And then you can also use the same progression, but go back a little bit and use that for Tier 2. So kids who just need a little bit more can receive that Tier 2 intervention as well. You see, we spend about, again, it varies based on the course and number of participants, about $30,000 for each of those trainings. So I know that's a lot of money, but it's really worth that money because the training is so good. Our teachers attend 5 full days, so 30 hours of training. It is intense. Your brain is fried by Friday, but it is so good because it doesn't just teach them how to teach phonics first, it teaches them the understanding of all of the phonics and really learning phonics, because that's something, that we don't necessarily get in our college courses or haven't had. The next piece to that is structures. And so phonics first ends in 3rd grade, and then 4th and 5th grade students will receive, or the teachers will receive structures training, and then they'll teach that to their students. So that's the continuation of that, and that gets a lot into the morphology piece, as well as continuing that phonics piece. And so our 4th grade teachers will be trained this spring in structures, and then our 5th grade teachers will be trained next spring. So then we'll have that full rollout from kindergarten to 5th. Our middle school interventionists are actually participating in the structures training as well, because it can be used as a Tier 3 intervention program, 6th grade and up. So that way, when students need that intervention beginning in 6th grade, the teachers will have that as well. So letters is a new piece, and yes, that's how it's spelled. It's very interesting, but letters is something that really did come about the same time as Alabama Literacy Act. It is excellent training in the science of reading. So really understanding how the brain works and what's happening as kids are learning to read and reading, and it gets into all the pieces of the foundational skills. Again, it is very intense training. So right now, teachers may choose to enroll and participate in letters. It is a 2-year commitment. So they are completing 8 units of work. They go to all-day trainings for that, and then they have lots of work and assessments to do on their own time. So after they teach all day, then they can go home and study and take tests. So it's really like a college course. And so many of our teachers have chosen to complete letters, so that's exciting because it is great training, and our state is funding that right now for our teachers.
There's a stipend for teachers, right?
There is a stipend, yes. So that's another little bonus as well. We'll get a little bit into CALT and NIHOuse basic language skills. Mandy's going to talk about that a little bit more. But those are some of the trainings and certifications that are specific, well, they don't have to be, but are specific to our intervention. And so Mandy's going to elaborate on those. And then the last one is dyslexia awareness. This is provided by the state. And this is also something that all of our teachers at elementary level are asked to participate in. Any questions about those? Okay, next is what are our literacy programs for K-5? Excuse me. I may need some water. Thank you. So first off, our core program for kindergarten through 5th is Benchmark Reading Workshop. And so that's something that was adopted last year and we're implementing this year. And you can see it's provides whole group instruction. Thank you. Level text for small groups, which is happening in Tier 1. And then, excuse me, resources for independent reading and conferring. The second piece is Heggerty. Thanks. All the things. And Heggerty is a curriculum that focuses on phonemic awareness skills, letter and sound recognition, and language awareness. And so this is something that teachers in the lower grades do as they're beginning their phonics instruction. So Heggerty really focuses on that phonemic awareness piece, which we know is critical. Then Phonics First is getting to the phonics piece. And there you can see a little bit about Phonics First. And the great thing about Phonics First is it is multisensory. It's great for all students. It is specifically really great for our students who have dyslexia, who have characteristics of dyslexia, other learning disabilities, as well as our English language learners. And one thing I want to mention about Benchmark is it is new to us this year. Probably the best thing I've seen about it is the emphasis on informational text. That's something we've been pushing, but there's a lot of really good informational text in there, which I think is great for our readers. It also gives them that content knowledge piece, which is critical. And the other great thing is emphasis on vocabulary, because we know if kids really don't have that vocabulary, that could also be an area in which they struggle. So we are going to I have a couple of video clips, and we're going to watch just a few pieces of these. This is Haggerty in action.
Lay down your bottoms.
And so this is a first grade teacher, and we're going to watch her do a little bit of this lesson.
Normal, Haggerty, and whenever you're ready, you go. All right. So, as always, we start with our rhyme recognition. Okay. So this is a little bit different this week than we've done in the past. Okay. So listen to me. You guys are going to come up with a word that would rhyme with the group that I'm going to give you. Okay. So for example, if I gave you the words flash and cash, what's a word that you could give me that would rhyme with flash or cash? Collins? Dash. Dash. See some twos. Genevieve? Cash. Okay. Caleb? Smash. Smash. Lilla? Mash. Mash. Trip? Ash. Ash. William? Trash. Trash. Julia? Sash. Sash. All right, good. You guys have the hang of this. Let's do a couple like that. Okay? Listen up. A word that would rhyme with moose and goose. Moose, goose. Hayes, deuce. Deuce. Lilla, loose. Loose. Collins, snooze. Snooze. Let me ask, is snooze a real word or make-believe word? Make-believe, but does it rhyme? Yes, it does. Caleb, caboose. Caboose. How many syllables does caboose have? Two. Good. James. Loose. Easton. Juice. Juice. Good. One more trip. Seuss. Seuss. Like a Dr. Seuss. Love it. All right, Lily. Rooster. Let's try that one. Moose. Rooster. Is that a rhyme? It does have the ooh in it though, so good try. All right, let's do another one. A word that would rhyme with bank and bank. Bank, bank. Give me just a second to think. Bank, bank. Edda? Clank. Clank. Julia? Tank. 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 Yes. Ethan? Mink. Mink. Okay. Real word, make-believe. Make-believe. Lilla? Blank. Blank. Collins? down words. Think. Drink. Blink. Yes.
I need picture and sink.
Sink. Yes. Good job, guys. All right. Now we're going to move on to our phonemes, okay? I'm going to give you the phonemes, and I want you to tell me the word that those phonemes make. Okay? Ready? O-N. Good job. O-I-T. French. Good job. Grease. Last one.
Okay, we'll stop there. It does continue on, but as you can see, the focus really is that phonemic awareness piece. All of this is done auditory, so they'll go on and they'll omit sounds, and it's amazing what these kids are doing in first grade, because I'm going to tell you, even when they got to that point, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to think about it, and they were just doing it like this. So these are routines that they're doing in their classrooms, and the kids are so good at manipulating that sound, or manipulating sounds, which is going to really help them as readers as well. So this next one, as I mentioned, phonics first, or phonics piece. This is actually in a third grade classroom. So just getting to see two different things, but at different ages as well. And as they do the 3-part drill. So we're going to watch just a little bit of this at the beginning. There's different parts to phonics first lesson. So we're going to watch a little bit of this. We'll get to see her then introduce their new skill for the day, and then also work on their new red word.
About some fake time with these because these sometimes are tricky. Ready?
Me.
Word, like work. What makes it
E-I-O-Y.
Do you see an E-I or Y? So this one says warm. Ready? Fabulous. All right, we're going to be going through these next ones. Still don't need your boards. Keep those down. Ready? Up here. Don't give me a vowel. Cut it off. Don't give me a vowel.
So she continues through these. These are all sounds that they've previously done. So none of those are necessarily new to them.
Or O-Y, boy. So we have 2 new cards this week we're going to be adding, and those keywords are coin, oi, and toy. Oi. Now, I love this one because you know how last week we had, it could be the beginning, the middle, it could be the end, unless it had these letters after it. We don't have that this week. We have easy ones. So O-I comes where? Look at the bottom. Usually found at the
beginning or middle.
And then O-Y is where?
At the end.
Is there something up here that told you it was going to be at the end? Do you see the clue up here that told you it was going to be at the end, John David? All the O-Ys are at the end. Is there something else that you see that told rest of the word comes before it. Fabulous. All right, who wants to help me read my oi words? Help me out, Finn. Coin, ointment, join, poison, embroider. That's a big one. Everybody say it with me. Ready? Coin, ointment, join, poison, embroider. Notice they all come either at the beginning or in the middle. Who wants to help me with my OY words? Go ahead and help me. Ready? Toy, joy, boy, destroy, enjoy. Everybody help me. Ready? Toy, joy, boy, destroy, enjoy. What do you notice about Troy? What do you notice, Penelope? Capital T. So what kind of word do we know that is?
Name.
Oh, thank you.
So there you can see she's introducing a new skill. They're actually working on diphthongs, O-I and O-Y. And so I don't know about you, but when I was in elementary school, I didn't learn about diphthongs. And I certainly didn't learn how to spell certain sounds, that there were different ways to spell it, and when you were using it at the beginning of a word or the end or the medial piece, that this is what you used and this is why. You know, that's not really anything we learned in college in our education courses as well. So the teachers have learned this through their training. It's like the different ways to spell those sounds and why, and then they're able to then teach that to our students, which will ultimately improve their decoding skills, reading, and their encoding skills for spelling, which are two critical pieces. The last part we're going to look at is red word instruction. So she's introducing a new red word. And those are the words that some parts make sense when they follow the rules, but there's usually going to be at least a part of it that you just have to learn by heart and or just kind of have to memorize. And so they're learning red words. And then they do lots of different things to practice their red words. One thing you'll see is that they then write them, and they use a bumpy board underneath their paper when they're writing. With their crayon, they'll trace it with their fingers. Then they write it, so that's multi-sensory piece. They write the red words, say it several times orally, and then they also do dictation at the end. So you'll get to see a little bit of that as well.
How many sounds? How many sounds? 3 sounds. So don't tell me what you know. If you know how to spell this word, tell me what the spelling of these sounds are. What is R? What is up? U? What is F? Neither of those follow the pattern. That's why it's a red word. Warning, warning, warning. Be careful. How do we spell rough? Does anyone know? Spell it for me. R. Alright, we know PH normally says F, right? But in this case, GH says F. That's weird. Those are the parts you just have to know by heart. You just got to memorize it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you should not be rough with your brother. Might hurt. Alright, red crayon. Let's go. Rough. R-O-U-G-H. Rough. R-O-U-G-H. rep. R-O-U-G-H, rep. R-O-U-G-H, rep. 1, 2, 3. R-O-U-G-H.
And that continues, and then, and you might have been able to see they had the bumpy board underneath as they were tracing, and then they'll do dictation after that. So that's a little sampling of phonics first. It looks different on different days because there's different pieces and parts to that. What's the bump
About some big time days because these sometimes are.
It is, trying to fit, it's like a red screen almost, plastic, and then that way they have that tactile piece as their, so you can, it's not rough, it's just bumpy. It feels like an embroidery. Yes, that's plastic. So the next thing we're going to talk about is intervention, and I'm going to let one of our interventionists talk about some different programs that we used. As I said, all of these are approved by the state task force. So again, many of the things that we've been doing prior to this. But one piece to add before Mandy talks is that we do have interventionists at all of our elementary schools and on up into secondary as well. But this, again, is something that we've had in place, and we've always really locally funded that. So obviously our kids have to have intervention, and you have to have interventionists to have intervention or to have Tier 3 intervention. And so that's something that we've known is important, and that's why we've invested money in that as a district. It is mandated in the Literacy Act, but again, not funded. So we spend approximately around $75,000 per interventionist. At the elementary level, that's $375 just for our 5 elementary schools. So that's not even counting in what we have at the secondary level. We even have some that are part-time that we bring in so we can have even more intervention. So that's not even counting the money spent on this. That's just our 5 elementary interventionists. So pretty big number, but again, we know it's important and that we know our kids need that so they can really make progress. So Mandy Smith is our interventionist at West. And so I just asked her to speak a little bit about some of our intervention programs, training, and then she's got a video with some of her kids she's going to share too.
Yes, so I'm Mandy Smith. I'm the academic interventionist at West. I'm also a CALT, which is a certified academic language therapist, basically a dyslexia therapist. CALTs are trained in the meaning and the structure of the English language so that then we can teach that to the students through phonics. It goes into morphology, like word parts, spaces, roots. So I did my training through Take Flight. It was a 2-year training for me to do so that I could then teach Take Flight to the students I have. We have some people who have gone through and done their night house basic language skills, and then any teacher can teach the Spire program, so there's no extra training for that. All of these are Orton-Gillingham based. They're all structured literacy, which means that they're explicit and they are very methodical. So the students come in, they know what to expect, and it makes them successful in that intervention time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So the students we just watched in the classroom settings that are not catching on, are they the ones coming to you?
So they would do Tier 1 in the classroom, and then if they continue to struggle, they do Tier 2, which is a small group in the classroom with the teacher. If that's not working, then they would go to the SST team, and if that referral is made, then they would come to Tier 3, which is me, or somebody. Does that make sense?
How many students do you work with?
In a day, I have 24, but then there's an instructional aide at my school, and then we have the 2 contract people. So, you're looking at like 55 to 60. It just depends on the schools too.
Not all reading, we offer math intervention. as
There's
well.
math as well,
Other-
yes.
other intervention.
I like to read part. So, if we have, any other questions about that?
Typically, how long will a student stay in Tier 3 with you?
It depends. You know, if they're in Tier 3 and they're making the progress, the idea is for them to go back into the classroom and get Tier 2. There are those students, especially with like dyslexia being, that's just a big, you have some that are really severe and then some that don't have it as severely. So some might stay a little longer just to try to rewire the brain so that they never get rid of dyslexia, but you can rewire so that reading isn't always so difficult for them. So it really just depends. And then some students, if they're not being successful, may need to be referred to special ed, to get an IEP, to get more help for what they need too. So
Can I add to
I love that.
So the SST team meets every 40 days to check on students' progress, and at that time, we make adjustments to the plan based on how students are performing, whether it's they're ready to go back in Tier 2 in the classroom, or they need to continue in Tier 3 to be successful. And then we check in with the teachers every 20 days on progress, but we formally meet with the full SST team every 40 days.
And that's the classroom teacher, the
Classroom
administrators?
teacher, yes, instructional coach, principal or assistant principal, counselor, special ed teacher, and we try to have a classroom teacher. Their classroom teacher is definitely there, but we've tried to, in the past, to have a classroom teacher be a representative as well. That has been a little bit more hard to do because of COVID and absences and fulfilling all the, we need to cover classes for those teachers to come meet with the team.
But Tier 3 could be within the 40-day period, I would imagine, if there's a real concern with teachers.
Yes.
That they're not just waiting on those periods of time.
Right, absolutely.
And there's also programmatic changes that we often make. So if one program is not working, that's why we have these multiple systems in place, because one size doesn't fit all, and so we know that, and that's why we have these levels. Some are a little bit, not easier, but they might fit the basic needs, and then if not, we have some more that are a little bit more intense, and so we have those programmatic changes that we can make if that needs for a student.
This may be a hard question to answer, but how many approximately kids do you think are in Tier 1 and Tier 2?
Everybody's in Tier 1.
Everybody's in Tier 1.
Everybody gets Tier 1 instruction. And if Tier 1 is, if they need a little bit more or just some support to kind of, with those grade level skills, then they get Tier 2, which is more targeted to specific skills, more time, smaller grade.
And that's
About how
done in
many
the
kids are
classroom.
in getting that Tier 2 level?
You don't really know because a lot of times they don't come to SST. That's just something the teacher does. So this conversation, yeah. So,
Classroom.
and if they need it on one skill, but maybe they don't need it on another, it's not like you just,
The research model is 10 to 15%
Right.
of a population will be in Tier 2. That's based on a health model, but generally that's.
Okay.
And is that just teacher discretion based on what they're observing in the Tier 1 lessons, or is there formal assessments that they're doing and based on those pulling them in, or kind of a combination?
Really both. So it is a lot of what they're seeing in the classroom, even observational, but then some of it, or a lot of it's based on data too. So that's why we have benchmark assessments 3 times a year as one data piece. But then we have several other ways to collect data. So it might be what you see when they do like a classroom assessment. It might be what you see in a lesson. It might even be just see something you see in their writing, or when you're doing a reading conference and they're reading with you and you notice, ooh, they're really not fluent, or they're struggling to decode, or they're struggling to comprehend. So there's, then we have like a phonics assessment we can get. There's so many pieces to really help us and help teachers identify and see that kids need that. And then if Tier 2 is not enough, and we see that there are really some gaps, then we add in Tier 3. So then they're still getting Tier 1, They're still getting tier 2, and now we've added tier 3. So it's really like three levels of support for students.
And when you said the benchmark assessment, are you talking about iReady? Or
Yes.
And for the classroom teacher, tier 2 is so just second nature. It just happens, and you're, teaching tier 1, but then when the students are working, you're saying, hey, y'all come here, we've got a plan, this is what we're going to work on today. So it happens just very natural.
And that's constantly changing.
Constant.
Based on skills they're doing, who needs extra support with those
Right.
skills. Phonics First has quick checks kind of along the way, so you can check to see how they're responding to that instruction. If you've got some kids who are still struggling with the encoding or the decoding piece of what you've already taught, then they might pull them in tier 2 to review those concepts.
I've even seen teachers do like enrichment, like the other end of it.
Yes.
They'll pull and further the lesson. So it's kind of a revolving door.
It is. So in this video, I kind of edited it myself, but you're going to see us go from one activity to the next. It seems very busy, but it's the same structure for every lesson. It's just the skill changes. So, and I put these cute little faces to hide the faces of the intervention kiddos.
We also have a green card, which means that it is regular for spelling. You're going to come back out and release and go in the letter name. Right? Name the letter and write it beside the last copy. Okay. What do we know that we do when we see SH in a word? How many sounds does it make? 1. And you will underline the diagram. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and code these, and then you're going to do some coding on your paper. Alright? Eyes up here right now. So we have diagram SH. We're going to underline. Alright.
I will shop for the sheets for you and you.
Alright. I'm going to read the first row. You're going to echo. Alright. We have from vowels, oo and o. You are going to look and listen. You're going to echo. You're going to echo in your mirror. You're going to pull the mouth pictures. We're going to label each.
Any questions for Mandy about that or intervention?
You're not just a water girl. I have lots of jobs. I'm Erica Pine. I run the, what am I slide today. The local reading specialist here at Cova Heights Elementary School. We've changed our job titles a while. That's why you guys need to know what my name is. But I just wanted to kind of share the last little wrap up here about some like practical resources that you as parents could use at home. And so I know, and I love what Ms. Hoskins said in the back about like challenging our kiddos, because we do have a lot of resources available for those readers who are on or above level. And I wanted to talk about that today too, because we do focus a lot. The Literacy Act has helped us really hone in and shore up our intervention for the struggling students, but we don't want to forget that we have a great amount of our students that are on level and above, and we want to make sure that we're challenging them as well. And so the sheet that you picked up in the back, actually this QR code is like really, really helpful. It's going to link you to a resource that the Regional Education Lab puts out, and it is full of actually not just ideas, but videos for you to watch as a parent, because sometimes, we get lost in teacher talk a lot of times, and we might say something and we're like, oh, you don't know what that means. So that resource, it's big, it's like 170 some pages, so you might want to open it on a computer if you can send it to yourself that way. But it has videos for you can watch, and we used a lot of the resources from that last year during our information session, but it goes over all the domains of foundational skills. Oral language, that's one of my big pushes, is for the oral language, because we know that speech really is the precursor to reading, and so there's just a lot of research out there lately now, especially with children that were home and not in the elementary and preschool settings during COVID, that learning loss because of the lack of speech and just the environment that we live in these days with the technology and stuff. So there's a lot of good things on there for you with that. But the website, district website under the teaching and learning piece, we have lots of resources available to you. The Alabama Literacy Task Force actually puts out grade-specific information for students in each of the K through 3 grade levels. So those are really good. They have things for each of the grade levels to work on in all of those domains too, like in phonological awareness or comprehension or vocabulary. And again, there's some digital. These can be printed out, or like I said, you might want to access it online, because often there are some digital games, or there's some printable things that you can print out and do with your students at home. And so that has been a real powerful tool that I feel that you can use. And also we have our Lunch and Learns, and the link to the blog or the podcast is on there as well, right? So this is a good place for you to visit. It's on the district page, not your school's page. So you have to go to the teaching and learning on the district site. And then this last link here we added, that's the one where it says practical tips for parents of exceptional readers. And there's just some really good information, because it's so hard sometimes. A parent at home is like, how can I continue to push my reader? And one of the suggestions in that article, there was several different ones. One I thought was just really powerful, and I've talked to some of my 4th and 5th grade teachers that are great reading instructors. They talk about picking books in a series. If you can get your kid in a series, then you have hooked them for months maybe, because they can really just read on to the next one, and then you as a parent, there's just so many great ways that they can connect one text to another. Like, well, how was the character in this story the same, or do they have different characters? Did the author write that in the same style? Like, why is it that you like it? There's just a lot of really good conversations that your advanced readers can kind of pick up on. So that was another one. And then, like we talked about, nonfiction is a lot of our higher readers, almost all students actually love to read nonfiction, but diving into nonfiction, and you can kind of go so much with that, especially in the summer months as we're leading into, like, go read about a place that you're going, and then y'all can do a little writing. Those kids love to be challenged, and some of them and they can get lost in a book, and I think that's what is so good. And I reached out to our GRC teacher here and I asked, do you have any good resources for the advanced? And she suggested this book for parents. Some of my best friends are books, and it was from 2009, so it's not a super old book, but it just talks about also making sure that, just because your kid can read Tolstoy in the 3rd grade, that might not be the best book for them. So really letting kids have choice in their books is so powerful. And rereading, even if that sounds like, oh my gosh, there are some books I did have to say, like, we're not going to read this book anymore. We read it a lot. The Dark and Wimpy Kid, I think all of my 3 kids have read every single one of them. And it's not that it's a bad book. We need to challenge ourselves a little bit, read outside of that. But I do think reading for fun, rereading books is a great way to continue to challenge ourselves, and I know as a parent, this is a new one for us with those graphic novels, because that's not something that I read. I don't love reading them, but like the kids eat it up. So like they also have, one that I think is neat, they've kind of rewritten a lot of our like maybe classic books that we have enjoyed in a graphic novel to way kind of like jump these kids into it. So that would be a good connection for advanced readers to read the graphic novel version, then read the regular version, and see how they compare, and you can contrast them that way. So this article is on that kind of goes a little deeper with those suggestions, but I just wanted to give you an idea. We do a lot, like she said, about challenging those students too in the classroom. A lot of times our teachers are doing book clubs where they're independently reading and collaborating with other kids in the classroom to extend their learning, to write about their text. So those are ways that we're also trying to extend the learning. We're not just only focusing on the decoding piece, but trying to stretch those kiddos too. So that's all.
What questions do you have? So that's really all we have to share today. I do have my email address up here, so that way if you think of something, you need a resource, you have questions, you can certainly reach out and email me, but we would like to answer any questions you may have today as well.
I have one. Okay. How difficult is it for a child to get to you? And do y'all need more of you? You know, like, could more kids benefit from working with someone in a smaller group setting that are sitting in tier 2, maybe? You know, I don't know. I'm just thinking through that.
I think that the process that we have for that works, because if they are getting that tier 1 instruction and the tier 2 instruction, then their teacher hopefully is recognizing, oh, these two things aren't working, so I need help, so I'm going to go to the SST team.
And research says tier 1 is the best.
Yes. So we don't want them to miss that instruction in order to be pulled out to go to tier 3. I would say if you had concerns, talk to your child's teacher and just kind of see where her thoughts are, what the data shows, and go from there.
Well, and the good thing is if a kid needs tier 3, and I mean, they're going to get tier 3, so it's not like we have a group of kids waiting that we don't have. Like we are fortunate that we're able to find interventionists to make sure that if kids really need tier 3, they're getting it. So it's it's not like Mandy has people waiting, but
And that's based on your 3 assessments throughout the year for already?
Well, not just that. I mean, that's one piece of it. But like I said, there's so many pieces that go into that because it's classroom assessments. It's what teachers are seeing in the classroom. I mean, so many times, and the coaches can talk about this because they come to them very often. If our teachers are so good at just noticing things. So if they're like, something's going on here, or they notice, like their spelling or something in their writing, or even just the way, like I said, if they're doing a reading conference with them and they hear something with their reading. So I feel like we've done so much over the years in training, just they're attuned to like, okay, something's not right. Even if they can't figure it out, they go to them. Like I said, we have other assessments that we can do to really help figure out, okay, what's going on? Let's try this. And then that's when they go to that team, that student support team, and let's say, okay, this is what we're seeing. What can we do to help? So it's, we do have those assessments, but there's so many other pieces to that.
So, what is missing for us that we want to do more of?
Yeah. Well, I'll speak personally, and y'all can add in too. I think just continued training. I think the more that we can train our teachers and they know that, can recognize and provide those things, like Megan said, even within tier 1 and tier 2, that's only going to help our kids. The other thing for me is the secondary piece. So what does this look like for our kids? We do so much at the elementary level, which is great, because that's when you really want to put these things in place and catch kids so that hopefully they don't need as much, but looking at more support for some of our students as they go up into high school. Kids who have dyslexia. And, you know, I will say a lot of our kids that I've talked to and worked with at that level are being very successful, but, you know, still have the pieces they struggle with, or it takes them a lot longer when reading's involved, that type of thing. So just, but, you know, more ways that we can continue to support them at that level, and as well as really helping our, I would say, secondary teachers within the classroom as well.
We forgot to add, we do have a digital piece sometimes because the taking out of class period, especially for the middle to high school people, can be difficult because it doesn't work quite the same as an elementary schedule. So we do have some digital platforms that we offer for intervention with some of our other students that really need it. So, you know, we know face-to-face is probably the best, but because of how middle school and high school works, that's just not always the best. Or a student that might have a health concern, we've had some things that we've had to do. So we do, that's why I like to say that we have like lots of different safety nets. And if one thing isn't working, I think that's what our teams do so well, is to reassure them. So to your question up there in the front, like to reassure, like if they're not doing successful in the class, we've got this, the first step we're going to do, and if that doesn't work, we can move to a more intensive. So I feel like we have these safety nets or a digital platform that can work alongside at home or something. So
Also, the principals, like, they'll purchase stuff for the middle school. Like Alicia purchased Reading and Math 180 for intervention. So there's other stuff that's research-based that we're using too that
Yes.
I haven't even brought up.
Yeah, and I think just our teachers continuing through the letters training is critical. A lot of our teachers have volunteered their own time, and schools have been so gracious in giving time for them to be out of the classroom for that training. I think that that might be something that's eventually required by the state, but so many of our teachers have voluntarily done it and are continuing to do so. So just support for that is so beneficial.
And we do fund those, so even though the state's paying for their training, which is amazing, so when they're out, we fund their subs. So that's one thing that, I guess a commitment from our district is that we would pay each time they're out at the training, we pay for their subs for those days.
So part of the Literacy Act, two pieces of it. One is the core curriculum piece, which you've addressed. The other is assessment, which you haven't talked about today, but which I reckon is our progress monitoring tool. And this year, the Literacy Task Force changed those that were acceptable last year to be different. We plan to stay the course. One of the things that, with both, Dr. Mackey last week in a meeting said that the main thing that we're going to assure with progress monitoring tools is predictive validity. And so I think it would be important just to hear why we believe what we're doing is the right thing, in spite of the task force determining for whatever reason that they did that this would not be, high rating would not be a tool that they would pay for.
Yeah, and that's something we've used now for several years. So one thing that's, we've participated, there's been several studies on even the validity of it, which is very high, but even the correlation with ACAP, which is our state assessment. And so the correlation rate with iReady assessment ACAP is extremely high. In most areas, it was like, I think it was 0.85, 0.88, something like that. So it is a very, high rate. Again, it's one piece of data. So that's kind of like that first screener that says, okay, here's, we're seeing something. So it can instantly, it gives kids a scaled score where they are in relation to where they should be on grade level. And then one thing that I think is the best is that the reports that you get, because it really breaks it down by specific domains. So it's not just here's a reading score, but it really goes to like vocabulary, comprehension with literature, comprehension with informational text, the phonics piece. And so for really to be able to help target it or to dig into one piece and say, okay, this is what it's saying from this assessment, what am I seeing in the classroom? Or do I need to do something more to really dig into this? It also helps with targeting kids, so even specific standards that they're missing on that assessment, and that helps again, like, okay, this is something I need to address in Tier 2. So to me, just the detailed reporting is a great piece for really our place for teachers to start. And then that's something that our coaches lead is data meetings with all of our teachers.
It also
so we don't miss
provides,
kids.
it also provides students with an individualized path.
Yes.
Based on their performance on those benchmark assessments, and those adjust each time they take a benchmark assessment. But also it gives teachers freedom to go in and choose specific skills to assign to students based on those diagnostic assessments.
I love iReady, but I will say by the time they get to secondary, they're over it. So, that's my downfall.
Did that take the place of Dibbles?
Dibbles is used for
Dibbles is
kindergarten.
used for kindergarten. Just kindergarten. And one thing about the iReady reporting, and what your question about Tier 2, one of the things that teachers can use when they look at their iReady reports is iReady will put the kids in instructional groupings, but then it will also, for every child, you can click on it and click on their different domains, and it will tell you these are skills they can do, these are next steps. So when you see kids that have a deficit, you can look to see, okay, what, based on iReady, what does it look like their deficits are?
And it'll red flag them, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. And then it also has lessons you can pull from through iReady, like teacher lessons that they can then use in that Tier 2 intervention. And sometimes it's a skill that they really don't have, and sometimes it's a skill they do have. They just, for whatever reason, they missed it on the test. But that's where the teacher's knowledge of that child and the other assessments they're using and looking at their writing and listening to them read and all of that help guide them as to exactly what things in iReady they need to address in their Tier 2.
How long have y'all been using iReady?
5 or 6 years.
As long as I've been here.
Yeah, and that's the other good piece is we really have great longitudinal data on our kids. So we're able to watch kids, and then that information goes to the next grade level as well. One thing we've seen, and again, no assessment's perfect, and there's always going to be a whatever, but usually when we see kids who end up in red and kind of targeted already, those are the kids that we're like, okay, they're already in Tier 3 intervention. So it's matching with what we're seeing as well. Generally, again, there's always exceptions. Our students that have really struggled on iReady, and we've seen that with them repeatedly, when we get their ACAP scores in the spring, it's generally those same kids. Now, every kid can have a bad day, but like I said, it's usually not a surprise.
And we saw a strong correlation with that even the very first year that ACAP was given, before iReady had time to do their full study. We could see that correlation of the kids that were 1s and 2s on ACAP were most of the time yellow or red on iReady.
So just out of curiosity, what is the state recommending versus iReady?
There are two. Amplifies one, which we're not using.
That's that Dibbles piece we use in kindergarten. And then the other one was, I think it was Ames Web for reading.
Yeah, we're not using that either.
Which they did not then recommend for math.
And so if the state is not going to pay for iReady, so that will be a district?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a small amount admittedly, but I can't say they won't, but my suspicion is they may. I do think legislatively there are conversations being had about this piece of it, because there's some disconnects clearly. So aspirationally, our system wants to add a world language experience for our K-5 students. And so coaches, Brooke, can you talk about how that supports at least the Tier 1 level, where we think that's supportive to our working literacy?
Sure. So one piece is adding instructional partners. And so that would be elementary all the way through secondary, which I think could obviously greatly impact all tiers, but we're looking specifically at Tier 1. So how do we improve our Tier 1 instruction? So then we have less kids who need Tier 2 and Tier 3. And so instructional partners would do a lot of coaching, training, and can really strengthen those strategies and the things happening in Tier 1. They can also coach and really help teachers to target and really dig in on Tier 2. So improving Tier 1 and Tier 2, I think instructional partners would be a great piece for that. The second thing, so looking at adding world languages to the elementary schools, that would be a special the kids would go to weekly. And so there's a great correlation between kids learning a world language, that exposure, and their literacy development as well. So I think that would just only enhance the literacy piece even more for kids to have that exposure.
And the push for STEM with there's a lot of writing that's involved in those standards, the literacy tie, so that what they're reading about in the nonfiction in the benchmark program, they'll have opportunities to go maybe extend that with some hands-on activities with the STEM resource teacher, or in the classroom be able to provide more opportunities. So I feel like the connection of those, because there's so much literacy really in the STEM standards, and so I feel like there's a way to just really amplify and like connect those pieces that the kids can read about, but until they really feel it and do it, they might be missing that piece for some of our learners. So I feel like that district-wide is just a big push for us.
That's great. Yeah. So the goal is also to add a STEM special, STEM lab at each of our elementary schools, so kids would also have the opportunity to go to STEM once a week as well.
Great job.
Thanks for coming.